Gophers basketball season is officially over, but priority numero uno for the offseason has officially begun, and it starts now. It's critical.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we are talking about the men's basketball team. They fell in round 2 over the weekend. It was a tough loss. It never really was particularly close besides little snippets and chunks, but the Gophers just did not look like themselves. So we're going to talk about what we saw in that game, but also what are the priorities for the offseason. What is priority 1, 2, 3, and 4? And also, how could it shake out for Minnesota? Then beyond that, we're going to talk about the Gophers spring so far. Like I said, we were there for practice number 2. I didn't finish all of my spring thoughts. We're going to dive into the linebackers, wide receivers, and DBs and my thoughts in those rooms, as well as things to keep an eye on. So definitely sit back, relax, hit subscribe so you don't miss any of your daily Gophers content moving forward. And we're definitely going to have a busy week for Gophers content because your boys got to get some extra shows out there for you. I had a rough March because, it's crazy. We've had lots of different things going on. The family is expanding, and on top of that, now we got snow in late March. So bear with me, but we're going to make sure you get all that Gophers content and then some. If you haven't yet, show others the show, tell them about it, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it on Instagram, wherever you want to share it, go ahead and share it. You can find us at Locked On Golden Gophers across all audio platforms. Wherever you find a podcast, find us at Locked On Golden Gophers and leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. And if you're over on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button so others can find us. Now, let's talk about that Indiana State matchup because, I thought the Gophers had a chance. And I think if the Gophers played at their medium, not even at their best, if they played at their medium basketball, their most competitive basketball that they played for most of the Big Ten season, if they played at that level, I think they have a chance against this Indiana State team. I think if they played their best basketball, they beat this Indiana State team. But ultimately, the Gophers did nothing. They did not do either one of those things. They ended up losing by a total of 12 points. Now, the Gophers fell to a better team of Indiana State, who is on a mission this offseason in the NIT to prove that they were wrongfully left out of the NCAA tournament. And you know what? So far, they've shown that they're right. They should have been in the NCAA tournament. They officially stack up into improved to 30 wins on the season after beating Minnesota and advanced to the quarterfinals. Now, it was a rough outing for Minnesota for most of the night, and Minnesota couldn't get out of their own way. They had issues left and right, and by halftime, you're talking about Dawson Garcia had 0 points, only 9 minutes played, 3 fouls, including a technical foul. Minnesota was shooting 22% from three-point, and that was only because of 2 late three-pointers in the half. Otherwise, they were 0 for 7 for most of the half. On top of that, Elijah Hawkins got banged up, did not really play much in the second half. I believe he had like 4 or 5 minutes in the second half because he had what looked like a hip injury. On top of that, there was a large spurt in that first half where the Gophers seemed like they were trying to get back into the swing of things, and Cam Christie wasn't on the court. Now, it's just like he has been sitting too long for a critical period in this half. So I think that overall, the Gophers were just kind of all over the place, and like I said, couldn't get out of their own way. But you add up all of those things together, Dawson not scoring at all and being in foul trouble, Elijah Hawkins getting hurt, terrible three-point shooting, Cam Christie sitting in an important stretch. You add all of that up, and you tell me you're only down by 10 at halftime, and I would tell you that is a Christmas miracle. And it's like Christmas outside with all this snow right now, so you can maybe believe me on that one. But Minnesota just couldn't get out of the way, couldn't find a way to put it together in that second half either. There was a small spurt where Minnesota went on an 11-0 run from the 14-minute mark to the 11:46 mark of the game in the second half, cutting Indiana State's lead to only 3 points. And at that point, you're like, okay, we can do this thing. This is the momentum we need. This is where we rally. This is where we can get it done. But alas, right after they go on that 11-0 run, Indiana State counter punches. They go on a 12-3 run over the next 3 minutes. And from that moment on in the game was a wrap. It was over. It was a distant finish for Indiana State, maintaining a lead between 9 and 15 points for the rest of the final 8 minutes of the game. So basically, Minnesota sat at almost double-digit deficit for most of the second half, including a decent portion of the first half. It wasn't close enough for the Gophers. They didn't play their best basketball. They didn't even play their medium basketball. And in the keys to victory that we talked about for that matchup, we talked about they needed to win on the boards. We talked about playing great interior defense. And then we talked about also having efficient three-point shooting. Well, they only got like 1.5 of those done, because when we talked about the great interior defense, we also talked about forcing them into bad three-pointers. Well, they did just that. They forced them to take many poor three-pointers. Now, some of them are open, but they're not the greatest three-point shooting team. They were 8-30 from the three-point line, 26% overall. That's exactly what you wanted to push them to do. But Minnesota also won the battle of the boards, not by a lot, but they still won on the boards, and they limited second chance opportunities, which we highlighted, to only 5 points off of 5 offensive rebounds. So the Gophers did very well in those categories, and you think it would have been a lot closer. And in fact, it's probably why the Gophers weren't absolutely blown out in this game. But they didn't shoot good from three-point themselves. They were 6 for 17, 35%, which isn't terrible, but it's not great. And like I said, we needed to have an efficient three-point shooting night, and the Gophers started 0 for 7 in this one. So overall, it started to tick back up in the second half with the shooting, but they just couldn't find their rhythm from three, and they could not guard the paint. They gave up 36 points in the paint. So although we said, yes, force them into bad threes, even though they did force them into bad threes, they also gave up a ton of points inside. Indiana State should have just kept attacking inside, with 36 of their 76 total points coming from inside the paint. And then they also had 16 points in transition. The Gophers could not slow them down. This was by far the best passing team that the Gophers had faced on the season. And there were far too many impactful turnovers. Minnesota had 15 turnovers in this game, with 19 points coming off of those turnovers. In the end, it was just far too much for this Minnesota team to handle. Even though they only dropped it by 12 points, it definitely could have been a lot worse. So the Gophers end the season on a rough note on the road in the second round of the NIT tournament to Indiana State, who really should have been in the NCAA tournament. Now, it was a rough final showing for this team. That was a fun team on the year. Beat expectations for most fans that had, and most analysts that had this team at the very bottom of the Big Ten once again. I believe coming into the season, I had them at 10th or 11th in the Big Ten. They ended up finishing 9th in the Big Ten, with an opportunity, if they would have won 2 more games, I believe, maybe 3 more games in the Big Ten conference, they would have been the 6th or 5th seed in the conference. So overall, the Gophers definitely showed a lot of people that there is a lot of growth with this team, a lot of talent with this team, and a lot of hope if they can keep it together. But now all eyes are turned towards just that, turned towards next year, and what are the steps for Minnesota to become a tournament team next year and build on the momentum that they had from this year. We're going to dive into that. What are the priorities of the offseason coming up next? First, we got to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, because like I said, it's still March and we're heading into the Sweet 16 this upcoming weekend. So you can say goodbye to busted brackets because of FanDuel, which lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Now, whether you're betting on a big upset or on the 1 seed, which I believe all 4 1 seeds are still going, so you can still get that chalk pick in there. It's time to go dancing with America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So go out there and take the chalk pick. Look, I'm telling you right now, Purdue is not losing unless they get to the Final Four. Maybe if they get to the Final Four, they could end up losing, but I think they are determined. They might pull a Virginia, being the only other team to lose to a 16 seed as a 1 seed. And then the next year, came back, won the entire thing. I was in the building for that entire thing here in Minneapolis at US Bank Stadium, and we'll see if Purdue can be the second team to make that happen. So I would put a $5 bet down on Purdue's next game, and when they win, you get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bucks for point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who wins it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut the nets down. On top of that, we got to talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, right now, I'm in the middle of getting a new vehicle. And while I'm getting that new vehicle, I'm thinking of all the different parts, the little adjustments, the little extra things I want to add to a new vehicle, which I am a truck guy. I got to get a truck. Many of you might not think that I would be a truck guy, but I am. So lock it in. But passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and what keeps your ride or die vehicle alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, superchargers, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, they've got you covered over at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts, yeah, you can always believe you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, not only will you find what you're looking for, but you'll take the worry off of your shoulders, because it's guaranteed to fit your vehicle every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, thank you once again for tuning in to your daily content when it comes to Gophers here at Locked On Golden Gophers. But if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long, working remote or what have you, you know, you have to turn the volume down with all that shouting and the arguing and all that. But you could make the switch today over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. So Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news 24/7, streaming on YouTube or for free over at Amazon Fire TV channel apps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, let's talk about the priorities for the men's basketball team this offseason, because there are 4 things that I think Minnesota has to do. And the first one is priority numero uno, which is retaining your players. Now, there are 3 priority players, in my opinion, that Minnesota has to do everything and anything that they can do to make sure they come back for the 24-25 season. And those 3 players are Elijah Hawkins, Cam Christie, and Dawson Garcia. Now, if you can get those 3 players back, I think this team can be special in 2024-25 and be a team that teams in the Big Ten will respect, but also fear heading into the season. So right now, it sounds like Elijah Hawkins is back. He said he was coming back. Now, of course, you could always have a change of mindset and whatnot, but I think he's locked in. I think he appreciated the fans this season and everything that he was doing record-setting wise for the program. He could leave such a huge mark on Minnesota history if he runs it back and continues to produce at the level that he did. So I think Elijah Hawkins is going to be back, and he could lead the forefront and the effort to get this core of guys back and to do something special with Minnesota that hasn't been done in quite a long time. Now, beyond that, like I said, you want Dawson Garcia, who is a priority player. Now, Garcia said he is going to make a decision relatively quickly in this offseason. Now, I really hope that he is back, because I think he just brings a lot to this team. Inside, outside, he can shoot, and he brings a lot of swagger to this team. But also, I think if he gets this core back, I think he won't have to have the pressure of having every look start or funnel through him. Now, he knows he can be the guy, but he doesn't have to be the guy at every given moment. And I think that was starting to come to throughout the rest of the season, but they came to him when they needed hit points most, when they needed a dependable bucket, a dependable player, a good look. They came to Dawson Garcia. And I think that that is what this team will need to be able to be a special team in the NCAA tournament. So like I said, I really hope he's back, but attitude-wise, something just felt off for those final couple games. I don't know if it's just me or if others were feeling that as well, but hopefully that's just me overthinking it all. But hopefully Dawson Garcia makes this decision quick and runs it back with his point guard, Elijah Hawkins, to have a special tandem on the inside and outside. And then you've got Cam Christie. Cam Christie, I think, has the highest upside on this entire Gophers roster, and he seems like he's either coming back or he's taking a shot at the NBA. Now, the biggest thing is, where is his name in the draft conversations for the NBA? If it's going to be anywhere in the first round, I do not blame him whatsoever to go to the draft. Now, if it's going to be even the early second round, again, I wouldn't fully blame him for taking a draft look. But if it's uncertain, if it's wishy-washy, if it's anywhere from the last pick in the first round to the last pick of the second round to undrafted, and it's all over the place and no real immediate feedback of a lock of being in a range, run it back. Run it back, do something special, be the focal point of the offense, step into your potential, get stronger in the offseason, and be a difference maker. Be a guy that will be a lock to be a first round pick, and be a guy that is featured, and be a guy that gets this team not only to the NCAA tournament, but helps leave a legacy here with the Golden Gophers. I think if Cam Christie does that, he not only becomes a hero in Dinkytown and he gets free meals left and right in his future when he's coming back, but also I think he could be the first Gophers first round pick that we've seen in quite some time. So overall, I think if he runs it back, it will be super special. But this is also one that I think it could take a while to get an answer on if Cam Christie is coming back or if he is going to test the waters with the NBA. Now, overall, I feel pretty confident outside of those three that Mike Mitchell Jr., Pharrell Payne, and Braden Carrington will all run it back. That gives you, if you get those three back, that gives you a core of 6 players, plus your new guys coming in, plus potential transfers that leave your core for the next season. And that core could be a special one. Now, there are questions about what happens with Joshua Joseph, or what if is Parker Fox done, or could he run it back? There are those type of questions, but overall, I don't think that those become so detrimental or impactful to the long-term outlook of the season. So that's priority number 1. But what is priority number 2? Now, priority number 2 for me is bringing in some impact transfers, namely in the front court, because you already have an official visit set up with North Dakota State's Andrew Morgan. He's a 6'10" center player that could definitely help take a little bit of the pressure and the weight off of Pharrell Payne's shoulders. He is initially from Waseca, Minnesota, so he's got a connection here, but he averaged 12.9 points last year along with 5 rebounds, so he could be a nice rotational player for this team coming from the transfer portal. You've also got another potential player that could give you looks in Francis Nawakori. He's from Champlin, went to Champlin Park High School, averaged 11 points and 6 rebounds last year. He has averaged close to 13 points, 11 points, 12 points in each of his 3 seasons over at UC Santa Barbara. He's slimmed out, but he has a great post game, 6'7", good length on him. He could be a defensive stalwart as well. I think both those guys could be welcome additions for the Gophers. I've also seen the Gophers getting very active across the transfer portal, so we'll keep you posted on what we hear on the potential names that could be visiting here with the Minnesota Golden Gophers here at Locked On Golden Gophers. But when you're looking at the team overall, if you get that core 6 back, your backcourt should be pretty deep, because if you can maintain your roster, you have Elijah Hawkins coming back, Mike Mitchell Jr., Braden Carrington, and Cam Christie. That's 4 guards right there, on top of an impact player in Isaac Asuma coming, who will be a freshman who plays. Plain and simple, he's going to play next year. That would be 5 strong guards that you have to rotate on your team next year. Now, if Cam Christie doesn't come back, then maybe you take a huge swing on an impact transfer at the guard position to add to this core. Maybe a Doug McDaniel, fingers crossed, with the connection with Elijah Hawkins. I highly doubt that would happen, but if it did, your boy would be giddy like a kid on Christmas morning. So overall, the front or the back court looks pretty good, but the front court could use some depth. Even if Dawson Garcia comes back, your front court is basically Dawson Garcia and Pharrell Payne. So they could use 1 or 2 more guys to give some more oomph in there, give some more post defense, give some more physical presence. And if they can create a shot, that just adds to it even more. Because if Parker Fox isn't back, if Josh Joseph does end up hitting the transfer portal, you really need some more bodies in there. Now, Joshua Joseph, to me, could be a perfect role for what we saw Parker Fox do last year. He could fill that void and then some. But it's a huge question on if he'll come back, because his minutes dwindled and he didn't really get opportunity late in the season, and the unknowns of this transfer era. So until I see otherwise, I'm going to remain under the assumption that Fox is gone, Enan may leave, and Joshua Joseph could leave. I would love to have those guys back for varying reasons, but I just don't see it right now. Now, priority number 3, after you've gotten retaining your players, after you've gotten some impact transfers, is getting stronger, because there were times where this team got bullied a bit inside versus Illinois, versus Purdue, and versus Indiana at times, and even versus Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament. So Minnesota has to get stronger on the interior, especially to be able, across the board, to be able to perform even better in 2024. Now, adding depth there can definitely help, but each player has to add some some muscle defensively to be able to take impact, to be able to not get bumped around or pushed around or taken to the cup. It's going to be pertinent that this team gets bigger and stronger so that way they can go further into a playoff push. And then finally, the fourth and final priority for the offseason is to push it to the max in the offseason. You've seen what it takes now. You've seen how to win in the Big Ten. You've seen and have the players that have the ability to be all Big Ten type players. Now is where the repetition comes in. Now is where you develop a new look or two. Now is where you add a new weapon to your arsenal for your game. Now is when the coaches have to fine tune and improve concepts. And that is the final piece. Once those first three steps are done, it's pushing, and then pushing even further to the max in the offseason to take it to a whole nother gear. Because this team, yes, it was nice to see the improvement, but they have to take it to another level in 2024-25. And I think they can do it if they can follow those steps, if they can retain those core pieces, if they can bring in a couple players of impact. This could be a very, very special team here in Minnesota, and we'll definitely keep them covered for you here at Locked On Golden Gophers. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about on today's show is final notes from spring practice, talking about the defensive backs, the linebackers, and the wide receiver room, and the noticings that we found in last week's practice. We're jumping into that coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Nissan, because right now March Madness is going crazy, and March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. And every week we're picking a team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all new 2024 Nissan SUVs. They're able to take it to the next level. Now, I got to tell you about one of my key picks, one of my Final Four picks. In fact, I have them in these championship game. Now, I don't have them winning, but I have them in the championship, and that's the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, they can only be described as the Pathfinder. They have been thrilling to watch, and they have really created a lane for themselves entering the tournament as one of the hottest teams in the country. They also had a date. They have a date with Illinois coming up. It might be the best matchup of the Sweet 16, in my opinion. Now, we've seen a lot of Illinois having played in the Big Ten, and Terrence Shannon Jr. and co. is going to give this Iowa State a run. They're going to give them a challenge. They're going to push them to the limits. But I think Iowa State has what it takes, and they can be described, like I said, as that Pathfinder. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. You can shop NissanUSA.com to take a shot at one of the new 2024 SUVs at Nissan. Again, that's NissanUSA.com. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping it up with some spring practice notes. I didn't get to cover all the position groups that I wanted to in our last show, so I want to talk about the DBs, the linebackers, and the wide receivers. Now, I'm going to fly through these notes, but the DBs, who was playing with the ones, the first team on the cornerbacks? Well, it seemed to be Justin Wally and Ethan Robinson, the transfer coming from Bucknell. Those seem to be the ones at the cornerback position. Now, Justin Wally was playing non-contact as well, so we didn't get to see all of the elements, but the first man up outside of that was Zaquan Bryan, first to rotate in, and then also Rylan Kelly was another guy who rotated in quickly. So those four, I think, are the core four. Those four I expect to maybe remain pretty similar when it comes to the first four in that cornerback room. Tariq Watson has seemed to fall down the depth chart quite a bit. Mike Gerald is the only early enrollee of the true freshman, and Samuel Madu was at the practice watching from the side with his family, but he is not enrolled into school quite yet. So that's kind of the cornerback room and how it has been slightly shaking out. But then you go to the nickel room, and you're talking about Jack Henderson. Now, Jack Henderson didn't practice at all because he had cleanup work done in the offseason, so he was not practicing, but that left a huge amount of opportunity for Craig McDonald, who took on a large amount of those nickel snaps, nickel reps, and he looked really, really good. Now, I can't recall if Giante McMillan transferred from TCU also had some of those nickel reps. I imagine that he did, but he is a player to keep an eye on. And then you move to the safety part of the DB's room, and this is where it seems to be very fluid and very wide open. It looked initially like it was Darius Green, though he was in a non-contact uniform, and then Kerry Brown. Those were the first ones I saw step up with the ones. That said, there seemed to be a lot, I mean a ton of rotating in that room. You had Giante McMillan. you had Coleman Bryson, you had Garrison Monroe, plus you have Coy Parrish, who will join the team in the fall. So safety feels like a deep room, and it's also the one where I have the least amount of clue of what will happen at that position and which way this thing will go. Definitely something to keep an eye on as we go in the spring. And then we turn it to the linebacker room. Now, the linebackers, it seemed there was like a core four in that linebacker room. We saw a lot of traditional two linebacker looks on the field with a nickel playing the more of the strong side Sam linebacker look. Now, occasionally Joey Gerlach was playing in that Sam role, but I think you're probably going to see a lot of nickel players in that role with Coach Heatherman in this upcoming season. Now, that being said, the Mike and Will linebacker combos seem to be Cody Lindenberg and Maverick Baranowski playing with the ones, and then Tyler Stolsky and Matthew Kingsbury playing with the twos. That being said, they rotated these guys left, right, and then some. So it could still be up in the air, but I am telling you, Tyler Stolsky is going to work his way onto the field. He came in hot late in the year, and he has not slowed down so much that PJ Fleck yelled at this practice, "I love Tyler Stolsky," in the middle of practice. The walk-on has come to play, and I am here for it. Now, like I said, it will be interesting to see how they rotate in the speedster linebacker, Devin Williams, who started a lot of games last season. As we mentioned, he was out with injury. Would he slide back into the ones like he did last year? Or also, that begs the question, would he have been a one if Maverick Baranowski and Cody Lindenberg were both healthy to start the year? Now, Maverick was, but maybe Maverick wasn't ready to step in, so maybe it would have been Devin Williams right away. Lots of questions there, but you see the upside and the promise with a Maverick Baranowski. Cody Lindenberg is going to start for his team if he's healthy, so who will be the ones partner with him at the linebacker slot? Or would Devin Williams slot in with the twos? Regardless, I think it's good to see that the linebacker room is healthy, and I'm curious if the new defensive coordinator and linebackers coach, Coach Heatherman, will rotate that room a bit more than we have traditionally seen. Now, I don't think that will be the case because Rutgers only really used two linebackers that had 650 plus snaps last season, and only one other traditional linebacker that saw over 100 snaps, and he had 371 snaps on the season. So overall, I think that core four is probably what you see from the Minnesota linebackers core this year, barring health, barring injuries that could happen. But if everyone's healthy, I think there's going to be a core four, and the rest will maybe be more depth or whatnot. So I think aside from the DBs and nickels being used in that more Sam linebacker type of position, that could mean a lot more work for your Jack Hendersons, for your Craig McDonalds, for your Giante McMillans. But when it comes to the traditional linebackers, that Mike and Will, I think we're going to have a core four to be on the lookout for. And then finally, we're talking about the receivers. I've talked about the receivers a ton this offseason. Not a ton of new gleanings from that receivers room. Daniel Jackson was not playing in this practice, was not suited up. I believe he had some cleanup work as well, so nothing to fret about right now. But that being said, Lemeki Brockington looks stronger. He looks faster. He looks more confident. I am very excited about what I saw from Lemeki Brockington, and he seemed to be playing mainly on the outside. Now, the ones receivers that were running in this practice with Daniel Jackson out was Lemeki Brockington, Elijah Spencer, and Kenrick Lanier. Those guys, I think, are going to be your first guys up, along with Daniel Jackson. Those will be kind of your headliners for the receiver position this season, in my opinion. So what happens with the slot is the biggest question. Now, it seemed like Elijah Spencer was seeing a lot of slot looks in this practice. Players, like I said, with the ones included Kenrick Lanier and Brockington along with Spencer. So we'll see if they are fluidly moving a lot of these players, if Daniel Jackson takes more slot looks as well, or how that will work out. But overall, I didn't see a ton more with working with the ones. That was kind of the core grouping. Now, when you go to the twos, you saw Christian Hoskins with the twos a little bit. You saw TJ McWilliams with the twos. You saw Jalen Varner prior to his injury working with the twos. And I think that was kind of the next men up mentality. Now, Christian Driver was not practicing in this practice, so I don't know where he kind of aligns being a new addition to this room. But I didn't see Danielle Hayes very much with the twos, more so with the threes, along with Redding with the threes, Konzemius with the threes. So overall, I think it's starting to shake out what the groupings are. But how will the wide receiver room be divvied up? How involved will the tight ends be? I think the tight ends had more involvement than what I anticipated in the spring practice, so we'll see if that continues. But overall, it is definitely an interesting grouping, definitely a very deep room, and we'll see how the Gophers address it moving forward. That's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Golden Gophers. I appreciate you for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe. Roll the boat, game out. Go Gophers, as always. And as I said, don't forget to hit subscribe.
can't talk so fast. You get tripped up on your